Thank you, Simon. Well, I think I should start by saying congratulations on the launch of this book, which, as you're pointing out, is filling a gap and was long overdue, I think. So thank you for doing the work. And let's wish the book good luck and may many people learn from it. I think it has a wonderful wealth of information in it. And I was very pleased to be able to write a short foreword for it, in which I obviously pointed out how the whole book has come out of the work at the New School of Psychotherapy and Counselling in London. And we have the principal here today, Claire Arnold Baker, and she will be speaking about her chapter in the book. And all the, correct me if I'm wrong here, Simon, but I think all of the authors of the book are either students or staff or graduates of the New School of Psychotherapy and Counselling, and it kind of brings together a lot of the different layers of research on trauma from an existential perspective that have sort of come out of the New School over the past few years. So it is a very important moment to draw that together and to have this text to refer to. Why is that important? Well, because the existential approach to trauma gives a very different take on it than the kind of current established ways of looking at trauma. The existential approach is always deeply rooted in a philosophical understanding, and in this particular subject, it is particularly appropriate because from an existential perspective, we're very used to the idea that life is difficult and that trauma is very much part and parcel of human existence, and that adversity can come and shatter your life and force you to find a deeper source for your survival, so that it can bring you to thought. It can bring you to a more profound way to make sense of the situation you suddenly find yourself in. And when you do that, when you step up, as it were, in that situation, what often happens is that your perspective shifts and that you get a stronger sense of meaning. Now, it's all very well to make such statements, but this book illustrates that and provides the evidence for that. And that evidence has often been missing from an existential perspective. So we have plenty of existential philosophers like Carl Jaspers who speak about limit situations and point out that everybody will be faced with those limit situations, will experience pain and illness and loss and doubt and destruction and fear and death, but that many people live in denial of that fact and try to avoid that in the most possible ways they can imagine. And of course, everyone will also have a chance to experience the opposites of pleasure and health and joy and confidence and creativity and love and everything that is good. But what the existential approach does is to show that these tensions between these opposites are actually something that it is important for us to learn to work with. Viktor Frankl spoke about taking responsibility for your own attitude towards your suffering when it can no longer be avoided. And he spoke even about changing tragedies into triumphs. So this idea that from an existential perspective, there is much to learn from trauma has been around for decades and even centuries, but it is only now that we are getting to formulate it more specifically. And I think this book really will give us sort of a stepway approach towards doing that. Now, in my foreword, I also speak a little bit about how the idea of trauma is always central to existential literature, not just to existential philosophy. So, for instance, Flaubert in Madame Bovary talks about existential crisis and describes the suffering in great detail. And Dostoevsky, for instance, in his novel Crime and Punishment, illustrates the very difficult path of dealing with adversity, even when you've brought it upon yourself, as is in the case in Crime and Punishment. And of course, going further back, Shakespeare does the same. All these kinds of well-known, highly successful novels and plays are poignant examples of people going through traumatic experiences and having to bring out of those their existential learning, discovering all kinds of rules and laws about living. Often, of course, in the form of a tragedy, not just a trauma, and the sense that people might be slipping into an abyss or that they are going down the wrong path while faced with the shadows of human existence. So, to learn about how we can navigate existential trauma in a way that might be productive and might be leading to a new flourishing, to a new beginning, is a very important thing to do. I think most people are aware of Nietzsche's statement that what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, something he said in his book, The Twilight of the Idols. But I like to remind people that this isn't strictly true, that some things actually do kill you and that some trauma is lethal, but that once you have been able to survive your trauma, then you stand a good chance of learning and changing from it, and indeed to do this thing that we see in these novels and plays, which is to become a hero or a heroine in your story and find a way to transcend this problem and kind of rise up to a different level of experience altogether. So this kind of emotional and mental journey of transformation is possible, and it is different for each person. And it isn't always successful, but as existential therapists, it's our job to understand how we can enable people to grab a hold of that and to find this new mentality of mastery over their fate and to learn to tolerate anxiety and uncertainty and to find out new things on this journey of adversity, which brings understanding of new things like truth or kinship and loyalty and generosity and overcoming yourself and honesty and owning up and understanding life, and also sometimes discovering a sense of humor and different ways of being with these difficulties. In other words, it's all about finding new ways of standing in your troubles and becoming more resilient. Now we're going to hear from many authors who are actually many researchers who have looked very specifically at how people have done that in very particular situations and how they have moved from what might have been seen as victimhood and affliction to something much more promising and much more with much more future to it. And I shall be looking forward very much to hearing from them, because they have looked at how they can take people in that situation to become authorities on their own fate and to actually share the wisdom that they have brought out of the difficulties and the purgatory that they have been through. So thanks for letting me speak, and over back to you, Simon.